Joining me now is Eric Fraser of the band Corvus Lore. And is it Fraser or Fraser? I realized I should have asked you before we started, but we're having so many exciting technical problems that I didn't ask.
Yeah, it's Fraser. Thanks for asking.
Fraser. Okay, so I was right. You guys have a great new song called "Romantic Traffic," which we'll talk about in a little bit. But thanks so much for chatting with me today. I wanted to just start off with getting some background. Reading about the band, you all have a very interesting, completely different backgrounds. But I wanted to hear a little bit about you. I found it to be interesting that you've been in a lot of bands. It says over the last 25 years, and so just talk a little bit about some of your experiences before we talk about getting into Corvus Lore.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, and exciting to get to meet your audience. I'm out here in the Bay Area, out in California, and I guess like most musicians, obviously did bands through high school and somewhat in college as well. But in the early 2000s, my brother and I were a part of a Latin rock band called Cielo Ceniza, and we were doing okay out in the San Francisco area, but actually got picked up by management that was visiting from Madrid, Spain, and then we recorded an album out in Madrid, in the year 2000, and put out a CD, and did that for about a year or two before coming back to California.
Cool. So then how do you get to meet the other guys? Did you know them before you put the band together, or how does that come about?
Yeah, so our bass player Mike Oneto and I had actually been in a couple of tribute bands out in the Bay Area. So the first one was a tribute to Foreigner. Did that for about 3 years, and then we followed up with another tribute to Foo Fighters. And then through that connection, we ended up meeting some other local folks. One of them happened to be our main songwriter Ryan Jones, who had some experience in Los Angeles working with various different songwriters and putting out his own music. And he just happened to be in the Bay Area, and so we all three connected, and then with our drummer Joe, we just started hammering out kind of cover songs out in his garage, and from that stemmed this idea that we ought not only fit really well, the four of us together, but that we were like-minded in the type of music that we liked and wanted to write. And so that was about 5 or 6 years ago.
And I just want to make sure so that I can have a good sense for you as a person. Can I assume that your Foreigner tribute band was not called Jukebox Heroes?
That's a good one. No, it was called Urgent.
See, that I like. We would have even taken Cold as Ice, but something about saying that we're Jukebox Heroes, it just would have I feel like it would have been, like Shakespearean times. People would have been required to throw fruit if you called yourself Jukebox Heroes. But look, you talk to a lot of. A friend of mine. Oddly enough, I'm actually wearing the shirt today. A friend of mine hosted a show for Access TV for years that was called World's Greatest Tribute Bands. So I got to just chat up with some of the musicians. Some of them I still know really well. And, in a lot of cases, a great example would be not so much from that show, but I was just thinking about Tommy Thayer, who's currently in Kiss. He was in a Kiss tribute band prior to that at one point. Right. And you can really get a lot sort of out of that experience, and I think that's probably a good stepping stone to maybe, getting together with a group of people. I mean, let's see how we play together. We'll worry about writing music later. Do you feel like that there's something to be said for that? Sort of like when the creativity is more like, well, how are we interpreting these songs instead of like, well, we've got an hour to fill. What should we come up with?
Yeah, I by the way, I have a lot of friends that are in really, really great tribute bands. Notably, the gentleman who produced our album, Tim Narducci, is in a ZZ Top tribute called Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers.
Nice.
And they, I mean, we're talking no wigs, no fake beards. These guys live it, breathe it. They sound like the real deal. But yeah, I would agree with you that cutting your teeth on the tribute scene is really good because people have an expectation of what the songs sound like, and so you will be judged as such, right, on how you present it and what you sound like. It was cool for a number of years, and then we just decided, life is too short. We really want to write creative, original hard rock music together, and kind of make it on that. And to me, it's far more rewarding doing our Corvus lore thing for a handful of people in a club versus doing 3,000 people playing Foreigner or Foo Fighters.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that there's something to be said for that. And, in a lot of cases, you go see a tribute band, people in the tribute band are often a lot younger than the actual band. The tickets are a fraction of going to see the actual band. And a lot of people live places in the country where bands just don't come. So I
Right.
know that it can, I mean, there are definitely, I've talked to people where they're able to quit their day job because being in especially a touring tribute band, but a lot of them also do their own music. So I'm sorry, so you said that was Mike, the bassist from the band, was who you were in a tribute band with?
Yeah, yeah, Mike Canedo, and just a phenomenal musician. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in the time that we spent together, he brings to the table a lot of interest in progressive rock, jazz fusion, and so and is just a lover of Paul McCartney and Chris Squire and all these guys that just paved the way on bass for doing melodic lines that just really, to me, there's like an integral part of songwriting.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you so there's two other guys in the band. How do you get to know Ryan, the guitarist and vocalist, and Joe, the drummer?
Yeah, so Joe is local to Mike and I. We all live in the same city here in the South Bay Area, and Joe had also been playing in some local bands throughout California, and the band that he was in prior was an original band that were getting some radio play as well, and Ryan just by sheer of like a connection, even through church, was just a guy that came through. That once we heard his CD of original music, his vocal range is incredible. He really can belt out a song with the best of them. But it was really his songwriting and his approach to like what he wanted to do creatively that just it felt like something that the four of us could get behind. I know a lot of people, local bands that are somewhat trying to relive things that may have happened in the '80s, and for me and the rest of the guys in Corvus Lore, it's more about writing songs that hopefully sound somewhat timeless and that you would want to listen to more than once, right? And just try to try to craft songs from that standpoint.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think that even when bands that have been around for a while put out new material, in a lot of ways, to me, I'm not trying to be insulting if I say, "Oh, this sounds like something that could have come out 20 years ago," but not in the way where it sounds outdated. It doesn't automatically mean that. It's I guess from a production standpoint, maybe, but it's more like, "Oh, this feels like." The way a song made me feel, in the late 90s. Yeah, I think that a lot of times, you just feel like, especially bands have been around for a while. It's like, okay, you're kind of still doing the same thing, but yeah, there's nothing like putting on an album that you loved back in the day, and then it just
Sure.
just sounds really dated, though. It's like, oh yeah, boy, what was all that? What was all that keyboard about at that point?
Well,
And
yeah, and Christian, to your point, you were talking about, people will do sound like, right?
Mhm.
Everybody wants a reference point. So when you hear something, if the band is, true to who they are and they wear their influences on their sleeve, we don't have any problem saying, "Oh, this reminds me of, X artist." And I think people try to ground themselves in that type of, again, like a reference point. Um, Especially if something sounds somewhat familiar, but not entirely, a blatant, rip off of something.
Yeah, I mean, this will be the second Kiss reference in this interview, which, but there's a group of musicians who started putting out. I think first they put out some EPs, but they put out all original music. The band's called Classic '78. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they record music that they work really hard to be like, this is like the albums that Kiss should have started putting out in 1978 instead of doing 4 solo albums and disco and all that. If they had kind of stayed where they were, and to me that's fascinating, but it's 100% a gimmick. You know what I mean? Where you're like, no, we want it to sound like, and they have guys trying to sound like Paul, and they trying to sound like Gene did back then, and that can be impressive. But when you peel it back a little bit, and it's more like I'm saying, sort of like a feeling, it's like, oh yeah, this is how I feel like the first time I heard Guns N' Roses or Foo Fighters or whatever. I
Right.
think if you can capture that, that's great. And you hear plenty of great new music, and when you're lucky to hear it, I guess, which is usually basically somebody sends you a link to a video, much like the video for Corvus Lore, which we'll talk about in a moment. And when you hear it, and it's a band you've never heard before, that's a great feeling to get. Like if you go and see a band, and the opener, somebody you've never heard of, is actually great. You know what I mean? That feeling doesn't happen as often as it used to, but when it does, I think it's great. And yeah, you don't want to be told that this sounds like something from 1992. But if it can feel like that, I think it's great. And in no way do I feel like it's an outdated song. Before we talk about the song itself, I feel like probably it's a very frequent question for you guys. But can you explain the name Corvus Lore?
Yeah. Well, it is unique. The way I break it down is that Corvus is, the genus species categorization for a raven, right? And lore, obviously, the mystique or the tale.
Sure.
And yeah, and so from the name, I designed the logo for the band, and definitely had kind of a Hitchcock, kind of Edgar Allan Poe theme in mind. And yeah, and so it works on a number of different levels, and especially when you're trying to stand out and have something that's kind of quick and unique. And so it's I think it served us pretty well.
Yeah, no, definitely. When I first read it, when I got the email, I read it as Corvus Love, so I was even more confused. But then I just put on my glasses, and I'm like, okay, so it's Corvus Lore, and yeah, and it's definitely. I don't know. I think it's it gets your attention in a way. Like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. It's not like names you usually get. A good example would be Foo Fighters is a pretty crazy name the first time you ever hear it. So you're like, okay. So let's talk about first. We'll talk about the song,
Yeah,
romantic traffic, and there's also a video for it, which we'll talk about second. So this song, it's out there now. Now that when you and I are talking, it's available for everybody. And what's the best way to find it, download it, all that stuff?
sure. So it's Romantic Traffic is it's the second single from our album Lucida, and it's available on Apple Music and on Spotify as well. Um, and I would maybe just ask people check out the video first. You can find that on Valley of Fire Records if you just search that up on YouTube. And yeah, we've got both singles up there. But yeah, so it's definitely available as of last Friday.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that was what I saw there. There was a link to the video. I could have also just listened to the song, but I wanted to check out the video, and I think that it's interesting because as the story goes along, there's not just the singer. You know what I mean? It's not not just Ryan singing. It's like everybody seems to be singing. Guy gets into a cab, he's singing, and someone worked in a store. So talk about a little bit about the idea of having to kind of tell this story where everybody's singing this song.
Yeah, so the song itself, if you want to just talk briefly about the meaning of it, is our singer Ryan Jones has had to do a lot of travel, mainly for business reasons, and it's been as far away as Taiwan, and those travels have definitely caused a stress not only on interpersonal relationships, family, your work. But it also the song has to do kind of on a meta level too about the traffic that just happens in your mind, kind of self-talk type stuff. But anyways, so he actually wrote the entire storyboard for the video, and because he's crafted the lyrics, basically in about 2 months he wrote out a shot list, and then we ambitiously went out on the charter to find an airplane that we could actually occupy for about 3 or 4 hours. And it just so happened that our director, Mike Sloat, who is a native of the Santa Rosa, California area, the Santa Rosa Air Museum, or the Charles Schulz Air Museum, actually had a couple of planes that you could rent out for the day. And so, not knowing anything about the interior of the plane or the dimensions or any of that, we just set out to get a wide angle lens with the director and see what we could do in that space. And so, yeah, there's basically was shot over 2 days. We did the night shots in downtown Santa Rosa, with no street blocking or any kind of help. So we were kind of like moving around actual traffic that was happening with the bicycle with the sidecar scene.
Right.
Ryan's loaded up with his luggage and his guitar, and then the other folks were actors that were friends of the director. One in particular I'd like to call out is V. De Montron, and she is the flight attendant, and is Kristen. She's a badass. She is a skydiver,
wow.
fitness trainer. She's an arborist. She's a musician, and so she showed up. We hadn't met her ahead of time, and just killed it. She just had many shots of doing pure improvisation. Like if the scene where she's grabbing the whiskey bottle and pulling the cork and spitting it out was all improv on her part. And and then gosh, I don't know, the guitar solo scene of me, walking down the aisleway was definitely a tip of the cap to Hot for Teacher, Eddie Van Halen. So and we tried to pull in some tongue-in-cheek moments, like our drummer played the boozy flight captain, and so there's a shot where he's literally like grabbing his leg to fold himself inside of the cabin, and just little kind of tongue-in-cheek moments like that. We wanted to keep it kind of fun and light, but also just have some semi-serious moments as well.
Yeah, well, so here I was thinking that this is the greatest flight attendant in history, and now I realize it's all acting. It's interesting you're talking about Santa Rosa for a couple of reasons. Because one, I live in Los Angeles, so it's like if you try to film anything without a permit, you immediately get surrounded by the showbiz police. That
right.
So you do it in Santa Rosa. Are you familiar with that area? Because I have 3 things I know about Santa Rosa. One, you referenced the Charles Schulz Museum. My wife and I went there once. We took a little day trip from wine country. We also went to Guy Fieri's restaurant. And the most random is that a radio show I used to work for, we used to get a call from a guy there who had a van, a conspiracy theory guy. And he had this theory. I won't say the name of his website, but he was convinced that Stephen King had killed John Lennon, not Mark David Chapman. And he would call in about regular stuff, about like, oh yeah, I got this about the news, and also name of my website with the crazy conspiracy theory. And we would just talk to him on the show, just be like, okay, so what else is there for you apart from this? Apart from the theory. And by the way, Stephen King did not kill John Lennon. Let me just go on the record with that. But people from that area would call and be like, oh yeah, we see his van around all the time. Because it would have a website on it. Yeah. So it's like, and this is going back like 15 years. So unfortunately, you say Santa Rosa, I don't think of Guy Fieri's restaurant first. I don't think of Charles Schultz first. I think of the guy with the crazy conspiracy theory. But he's not in the video, so that's good.
Well, I do have one more place for you that
Yeah.
we should point out for Santa Rosa. Russian River Brewery, so they got Pliny the Elder on tap there,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and of those shot scenes, like it was pretty much around the railroad station there. So right on the street corner. I'm not too familiar with the entire town, but there was also like a major car show happening that weekend, and just things you couldn't predict that you kind of just have to, think on the fly and just
Yeah.
just work around things. I mean, literally, our singer is. Uh, in the storyline we called it a rickshaw, but really this was like a bike with a sidecar, but being piled up with a suitcase, your guitar case, a couple other things, going through real traffic, and the guy riding the bike just has a GoPro, and you're hoping for magic, right? You're hoping for things to look great on camera, and I think it turned out pretty good.
Yeah, no, it looks cool, and I don't know. I mean, that's one of the craziest things about technology now is that you can go out without permits, as we established, and film a video. It still looks really cool. You talked about Hot for Teacher. I can only imagine what the budget was for the Hot for Teacher video, considering the band that it was for, and that there were probably some, interesting things that needed to be on set for that. But
Oh yeah, and we're obviously not signed to Warner Brothers, but
yet,
our director, Mike Sloat, he's considered like the go-to guy in the Bay Area, and he works with tons of bands like Exodus and a ton of local bands. And his ability to work within like a shot schedule and a budget of the bands has just been really like advantageous for folks that are just trying to get started like we are. And he builds his own custom guitars. So if you go check out Mike Sloat Guitars, you'll see some pretty rad stuff up on his
cool.
website.
So you mentioned that this is the second single from the album. Is the album forthcoming? Is it going to be available on a set day, or is it just kind of doing song by song, and you guys will figure it out?
Yeah, well, so the first single, Boxing Ballerina, came out I think I want to say it was around the March timeframe this year. And so we worked that single for a bit, entered it into a international film festival, and actually it won Best Music Video for the Poppy Jasper Film Festival around the April-May timeframe. And then we started working on Romantic Traffic. And I think for now, there's 9 songs on the album. The idea is that if we can get more, people interested in the music, watching the videos, and then being able to tour and gig against those songs, then I think there'll be a time when it makes sense to kind of put out the full 9-song EP. Because my opinion is that if we came out of the gate and just said, "Hey, everybody, go check out Lucida. Here's the 9 songs," you might get a flurry of activity like in the first couple of weeks, and then it tends to die down. Plus, we enjoy making videos too, so that there is that side to it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and there is no reason to rush it. Yeah, I mean, if you were to do even 7 videos, that's 7 different times where you like you said, you get to work the song and get it out there. And so hopefully the reaction's been good to both of them. And do you guys already know? Do you have a song for another video, or you gonna figure that out down the road, or is the new storyboard already drawn?
I think in Ryan's head, it probably is already completely 100% written out. Um, so there's 9 songs. Boxing Ballerina definitely stood out as a single, and so did Romantic Traffic. And there's a few other sides to the band. Like we got one song on the album called Sparrow in the Sun that is it's all acoustic, and it's delivered in a very kind of from an honest standpoint, and no smoke and mirrors whatsoever, right? So we got that, and it'll be tough. Gosh, they all seem to have kind of a thematic element to them. But yeah, I think we could probably narrow it down between 1 or 2 songs that could end up being the next single for Corvus.
Right. And do you guys have a website that's like just the band's name, or how do people? What are the many ways people can keep tabs and check out the video and look for the next one?
Yeah, so corvuslore.com is the site. That's where both of our singles are posted. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook just by, typing in /corvuslore. And that's where we can all connect.
Great. Well, it's been great getting a chance to connect with you and getting to, just check out the song. That's part of the fun of just getting to talk to these musicians, is that I hear a lot of songs that I don't know that would have ever been brought to my attention. And anything I can do to help get it out there. Our audio audience is about to hear a little bit of the song on our way into our next segment. And if they like it, just, you can always just Google Corvus lore and everything comes up that way too. It's, again, talking about the ease of which things happen with technology. It's a lot easier to, like, oh, this band that I want to know more about, I have, a device in my hand where I can find out literally everything about them, so let me do that. So hopefully people check it out. Eric, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for working through some awkward technical problems. I've had a few lately, but it was the first one.
Hey,
You couldn't, I
Christian,
couldn't hear you. You could hear me, but now we hear each other. Everybody wins.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and enjoyed the questions. And hopefully we get to talk again another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, be in touch whenever the mystery third video comes. But for now, Romantic Traffic is the song. Corvus Lore is the band. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.